The bells of St. Thomas Episcopal Cathedral tolled noon across the gray Philadelphia sky, each chime a heavy blow against the November quiet. At the back of the cavernous nave, Clara Ashford stood clutching white camellias, her knuckles bloodless. The flowers felt more appropriate for a funeral than a wedding. Her own. At the altar, Dr. Damian Cross waited devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, but his slate-gray eyes were cold and distant. As she reached his side, he leaned toward her, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "Let us just get this over with." The ceremony proceeded like a rehearsed play. Damien's responses were clipped and mechanical. When the time came for the rings, his touch was brief and impersonal. A transaction? The kiss was a cold press of lips, the sealing of a contract, not a union. In the back of the cathedral, Clara could see Dr. Victor Cross, Damien's father, beaming with predatory satisfaction. This was his triumph the day the upstart Cross name was finally linked to the old money Ashfords. In the silent limousine, the facade shattered. Damian ripped at his bow tie and stared out the tinted window. The reception, Clara began. 3 hours, he cut her off. We show up, we shake hands, we cut the cake, and we dance once for the photographers. After that, you can do whatever you want. I have surgery at 6 in the morning. It is our wedding day, she said. He finally looked at her, his eyes bitter and cold. This is the day my father bought your family's name, and I paid the price for his social climbing. Nothing more. As the limousine glided through Philadelphia, Clara understood she had just traded her freedom for her mother's life. Somewhere across town, Margot Ashford was breathing on a machine, her every breath paid for by this hollow sham. And sitting beside the stranger who was now her husband, Clara felt her heart crack under the weight of a marriage that felt like a life sentence. 3 years earlier, the Ashford estate had been the crown jewel of Philadelphia's main line. Now at 22, Clara stood in her father's grand library, watching strangers catalog their lives for auction. Her mother, Margot, sat rigidly in a wingback chair, her hands trembling. "Where is he?" she asked. Clara did not have to ask who. Her father had vanished, leaving only empty bourbon bottles and gambling markers. The publishing empire that had sustained their family for a century was gone, sold to cover his spiraling debts. The appraiser cleared his throat. The bank requires the house to be vacated by the end of the month. 4 days. That night, as Clara helped her mother sort through old books, Margot collapsed. The heart attack, as the doctors at Jefferson University Hospital explained, was severe. Months of financial pressure, the quiet malnutrition of skipping meals, the trauma of losing everything had taken their toll. She will need extensive treatment, a cardiologist named Dr. Reyes told Clara. Surgery, ongoing medication, round-the-clock care. I will not lie to you, Miss Ashford, this will not be inexpensive. Clara stared at the cost sheet, the numbers swimming before her eyes. The out-of-pocket expenses were staggering. It was then that Dr. Victor Cross appeared, striding down the corridor like an angel of mercy in a bespoke suit. "Clara, my dear," he said, his smile radiating warmth. "I came as soon as I heard about Margot." "You must not worry about the medical bills," he assured her. "Margot will receive the very best care. I will see to it personally. Your grandfather helped publish my first medical textbook decades ago. This is simply me returning a favor." 3 weeks later, Margot was stable, but far from recovered. Victor invited Clara to lunch at the elegant Union League. It was there, over lobster biscuit, he laid his cards on the table. A marriage. Your mother would receive the finest medical treatment, all expenses covered indefinitely, he explained. You would be freed from working multiple jobs just to survive. And my son Damien would have a wife who understands the weight of a family name. That night, sitting by her mother's hospital bed, Clara watched the machines keeping Margot alive. Her 3 part-time jobs barely covered rent and groceries. Without Victor's intervention, her mother would be transferred to a state facility. Margot stirred her eyes, fluttering open. "What are you thinking about, darling?" Clara forced a smile. "Nothing important, Mom. Just planning the future." But there was no future to plan. Victor Cross had trapped her, using her love for her mother as the key. The wedding was set for 6 weeks later. Victor Cross stood at his office window, gazing out at the Schuylkill River. At 64, he had amassed a medical empire worth hundreds of millions. Everything except the one thing that mattered most: acceptance. The polite rejection from that afternoon still stung. The old money gatekeepers of Philadelphia's exclusive clubs had been condescendingly gentle. "Your family lacks the historical connections our clients require." Nothing personal, simply a matter of maintaining standards. Victor sat alone, a cold fury burning in his chest. 40 years he had spent building his practice, saving the lives of men whose grandfathers had looked down on his immigrant parents. And still they dismissed him. That evening he drove slowly past the darkened Ashford estate. He remembered the parties the old Mr. Ashford used to host, elegant affairs where the city's founding families drank champagne. He'd attended as a guest, always on the periphery. The Ashfords were American aristocracy. Even bankrupt and broken, their name carried more weight in the circles. Victor desperately wanted to conquer than all his millions ever could. And that was when the idea, cold and brilliant, began to form. He did his research. The gambling debts were catastrophic. Margot's condition was genuinely dire. And Clara was perfect, beautiful, educated, and utterly desperate. She carried the one asset he could not buy: a name that would unlock every door. Damian predictably did not take the news well. He stormed into Victor's office, his face a mask of fury. "You want me to marry a girl I have barely spoken to?" "I want you to marry an Ashford," Victor replied calmly. "Her lineage, a social standing that predates this nation." "What about Celeste?" Damian shot back. "We've been together for 2 years. Celeste is a gallery curator," Victor dismissed. "She is for entertainment, not for partnership. And if I refuse..." Victor's expression turned to ice. "Then you can explain to your patients why their head of cardiothoracic surgery is suddenly unemployed." The threat hung between them like a guillotine's blade. That night, Damian ended his relationship with Celeste. She was not surprised, only bitter. "Your father's been circling that girl like a shark since her family went bankrupt." Everyone saw it coming. 6 weeks later, Damian stood at the altar, watching a young woman he barely knew walk toward him in a cloud of white silk, and he understood he had just traded his own freedom for his father's ambition. The penthouse at 2 Liberty Place was a monument to wealth. Perched 40 floors above Philadelphia, it was all glass, steel, and cold minimalist art. It was also the loneliest place Clara had ever lived. "Your room is down the hall," Damian said, gesturing vaguely. He barely glanced at her single suitcase. "The housekeeper comes on Mondays and Thursdays." Then he disappeared into his office. The first weeks established a routine of mutual avoidance. He left before dawn and returned long after she had retreated to her room. When their paths did cross, he treated her with the same polite efficiency he used with medical equipment representatives: cordial, correct, and utterly devoid of warmth. Clara spent entire days at the hospital visiting her mother. The private room Victor had arranged was like a luxury hotel suite. Margot was improving, but her eyes were sharp. "You are too thin, darling. Are you eating properly?" "I am fine, Mom." Clara forced a bright smile. "Thanks to your sacrifice," Margot whispered. "My dear, brave girl, what have I allowed you to do?" "You did not allow anything," Clara lied. "I chose this." It was a fiction they both pretended to believe. One afternoon during her regular visit, Clara was walking down the corridor toward her mother's room when a woman stepped directly into her path. She was stunning, tall, with honey blonde hair, swept into an elegant twist, and wore a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe. Her green eyes swept over Clara with cold assessment. "So you are the new Mrs. Cross?" Clara stopped. "Do I know you?" "No," the woman said, her smile sharp as cut glass. "But you should know me. My name is Celeste. I was Damian's fiancée until your family's name was auctioned off to the highest bidder." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "I did not." "Of course you did not," Celeste interrupted, her voice dripping with venom. "Damian told me everything. How his father threatened his career. How he had no choice. How he still loves me." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You're just a placeholder, darling. A transaction. And transactions always have an expiration date." Clara's hands trembled at her sides, but she forced her voice steady. "If Damian wants to be with you, then why are you telling me this instead of him?" Something flickered in Celeste's eyes. A crack in her polished armor. "Because he is too honorable to break a contract." "But contracts can be broken?" She tilted her head, studying Clara like a specimen. "Think about that, Mrs. Cross. The next time you lie awake in that cold penthouse, wondering why he never looks at you." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the hospital floor like a countdown. Clara stood frozen in the corridor, her heart pounding. She had known the marriage was a sham, but hearing it confirmed by the woman Damian actually loved. That was a different kind of wound. That evening, Damian returned earlier than usual. Clara was sitting on the sofa, staring at nothing. "I met Celeste today," she said without preamble. He stopped mid-step, his face going pale. "What?" "At the hospital. She was waiting for me outside my mother's room." Clara finally looked at him. "She told me everything, Damian. That you still love her. That I am just a placeholder. That our marriage has an expiration date." Damian's jaw tightened. "Clara, is it true?" she interrupted, her voice cracking. "Just tell me if it is true." He was silent for a long, terrible moment. "I do not know what I feel anymore," he finally said. "But I know what I owe you. Honesty." "Yes," she whispered. "It is true that Celeste and I were together for 2 years. It is true that my father forced me to end it. It is true that I resented you for being the reason I had to let her go." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure, fracturing. "But Claire, I have not seen her since the wedding. I have not called her. I have not..." She held up her hand. "Stop. Just stop." She stood, her eyes burning. "I did not ask for this marriage either, Damian. I did not ask to be trapped in your penthouse, treated like an unwanted guest in what is supposed to be my home. But I have tried to be patient, to understand that you were forced into this too. And all this time you were still in love with someone else." "Clara..." "I need a thanks," she said, backing away. "Please, just leave me alone tonight." He looked at her, his face a mask of anguish and confusion. But he nodded. "Okay. I will be in my study if you need me." She did not call for him that night, and he did not come to her. The annual hospital gala at the Bellevue Hotel was everything Clara had expected. Opulent, suffocating, and meticulously designed to showcase the social triumph of the Cross family. She moved through the glittering ballroom like an actress in a well-rehearsed play, smiling at the right moments, making the appropriate small talk, and allowing Damian's hand to rest possessively on the small of her back as he charmed donors and hospital board members. They were the perfect couple, she thought bitterly. beautiful, well-bred, and utterly miserable. Halfway through the evening, Damian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. "I need to take this," he murmured. "It is the hospital." He slipped away toward the terrace. But Clara had seen the name on the screen before he turned. Celeste. Her stomach dropped. She waited 5 minutes, then followed him. She found him on the terrace, his back to her, his voice low and urgent. "I cannot do this right now, Celeste. I am at a public event with my wife." A pause. "No, I am not coming to see you. I told you it is over." Another pause, longer this time. "Because she does not deserve to be humiliated." Clara's breath caught. "Whatever you think of this marriage, Celeste, she is. My wife and I will not." He turned and saw her. His face went pale. "I have to go," he said into the phone and hung up. "Clara." She was already walking away. He caught up to her in the empty corridor outside the ballroom. "Clara, please let me explain." She whirled to face him. "Explain what?" "That you are still talking to her. That she still calls you and you still answer. That even now, even here, she is more important than—" "She is not more important," he interrupted, his voice fierce. "She called because she heard about the gala and wanted to upset me. That's what she does, Clara. She manipulates, she provokes, And you let her—" Clara's voice was cold. "Every time you answer that phone, you let her. When were you going to tell me you were still in contact with her?" "I was not," he said, then stopped. "I was trying to make her understand that it is over. But clearly she does not. And clearly neither do you." "Clara!" "I cannot do this anymore, Damian." She felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "I cannot keep pretending that this marriage is anything more than a performance for your father's cameras. I cannot keep sharing a home with a man who looks at me like I am a stranger. I cannot keep—" Her voice broke. "I cannot keep loving someone who will never love me back." The confession hung in the air between them. Damian stared at her, his gray eyes wide with shock. "Clara, forget I said that." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. He did not follow her. That night, Damian drove home alone through a storm that had descended on Philadelphia with sudden fury. Rain hammered the windshield and sheets, and the Schuylkill Expressway had become a river of blurred red taillights and churning water. His hands gripped the steering wheel, Clara's words echoing in his mind. "I cannot keep loving someone who will never love me back." She loved him. After everything he had put her through, the coldness, the distance, the ghost of Celeste haunting their marriage, she loved him. And he had been too blind, too cowardly, too consumed by his own resentment to see what was right in front of him. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He loved her too. He had been falling for her for months. The way she cared for her mother with fierce devotion. The way she moved through his cold penthouse and made it feel warmer simply by existing in it. The way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he was not watching, with eyes full of a tenderness he did not deserve. He loved her, and he had to tell her. He reached for his phone to call her. In that split second of distraction, his tires hit a deep patch of standing water. The car hydroplaned. The wheel jerked violently in his hands. He tried to correct, but the vehicle was already spinning the world outside, the windows becoming a dizzying blur of rain and light and darkness. The impact came from the passenger side. The guardrail crumpled like paper. Then the car flipped. Once, twice, and everything went black. The call came at 2 a.m. Clara was still awake, sitting on the sofa in her robe, staring at the rain-streaked windows. She answered on the first ring. Mrs. Cross, this is Jefferson University Hospital. Your husband has been in a serious accident. The drive to the hospital was a blur of rain and terror. She burst through the emergency room doors to find Victor already there, his face ashen. What happened? She demanded. He lost control on the expressway. Victor said, his voice hollow. The roads are flooded. They're saying he hydroplaned into the guardrail. He's in surgery now. Internal bleeding, a collapsed lung, possible spinal damage. Clara felt the floor drop out from under her. Is he going to survive? Victor looked at her, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. I do not know. They waited for 6 hours. Clara did not sleep, did not eat, did not move from her chair in the surgical waiting room. She just sat there replaying their last conversation over and over. I cannot keep loving someone who will never love me back. She had told him she loved him. And then she had walked away. And now he might die without ever knowing that she did not mean it the way it sounded. That she would keep loving him even if he never loved her back. That she would keep loving him forever. Finally, a surgeon emerged, his scrubs stained with blood. Mrs. Cross, he is stable, but the next 48 hours are critical. We had to remove his spleen and repair a tear in his lung. There is significant swelling around his spinal cord. We will not know the full extent of the damage until he wakes up. When can I see him? The surgeon nodded. Follow me. Damian lay in a private recovery room surrounded by beeping monitors and humming machines. His face was bruised and swollen, his body wrapped in bandages and connected to tubes. But he was alive. Clara pulled a chair to his bedside and took his hand. It was warm. She pressed it to her cheek and finally let herself cry. I am here, she whispered. I am not going anywhere. Just please wake up. Please. He woke 3 days later. Clara was dozing in the chair beside his bed when she felt his fingers twitch in her hand. Her eyes flew open. Damian? His eyelids fluttered, then opened. His gray eyes were foggy with pain medication, but they found her face and focused. Clara, he rasped. I am here, she said, leaning closer. Tears already streaming. I am right here. I was coming home to tell you, he whispered, his voice cracked and weak. Tell me what? That I love you. Her breath stopped. I was so blind, Clara. I was so angry at my father, at the situation, at myself, that I could not see what was right in front of me. But I see it now. I love you. I have been falling in love with you for months. Maybe since the beginning. She pressed her forehead to his, her tears falling onto his bruised face. I love you too, Damian. I never stopped. I will never stop. He squeezed her hand weakly. Then stay. Forever. Not because of the contract. Because you want to... I want a she, whispered. I want everything with you. 3 months after the accident, the penthouse no longer felt like Damian's silent marble fortress. The hospital bed had been moved to the living room where sunlight poured through the tall windows. Clara had filled the space with soft blankets, fresh flowers, and the quiet hum of a life being rebuilt. She fed him soup, she helped him walk, she laughed at his terrible jokes. And every night she fell asleep beside him, her hand in his. One evening, as they sat on the sofa together, watching the city lights flicker to life, Damian turned to her. I need to tell you about Celeste. Clara stiffened but nodded. I ended it, he said. Finally and completely. I called her from the hospital when I was lucid enough to speak. I told her there was no future for us. that I was in love with my wife, and that I needed her to stop contacting me. How did she take it? Not well, but I do not care. He took Clara's hand. I should have done it the day we married. I should have been faithful to you from the beginning, even if our marriage was just paper. I am sorry it took nearly dying for me to become the husband you deserved. Clara squeezed his hand. You are here now. That is what matters. He kissed her then, slowly, tenderly, a kiss full of promises and a future neither of them had dared to dream of. It was a Tuesday morning when Clara first suspected. She had been feeling exhausted for weeks, attributing it to the stress of Damian's recovery and her mother's ongoing treatment. But when the smell of Damian's coffee made her bolt to the bathroom for the third morning in a row, he was waiting outside the door when she emerged. Clara, I think we need to get you a test. Her eyes widened. You think? I am a doctor, he said, his voice gentle, but his eyes shining. And I have been watching you for weeks. The fatigue, the nausea, the way you cried at that commercial about the puppy. I was not crying. You were definitely crying. She laughed, then pressed her hand to her stomach. You really think? I think we should find out together. The test was positive. Damian held the small plastic stick in his trembling hands and looked at her with tears streaming down his face. We are having a baby. She nodded, unable to speak. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the universe. I love you, he whispered. I love our baby. I love this life we are building. Thank you for not giving up on me. She pulled back to look at him. I will never give up on you, Damian Cross. Never. The obstetrician's office was cool and quiet. Clara lay on the examination table, her hand held tightly in Damian's. The technician moved the wand over her abdomen, and there it was. A tiny, flickering pulse of light. That is your baby's heartbeat. Damian let out a shuddering breath. Tears hot and unrestrained streamed down his face. Our baby, he whispered, kissing her fingers. In the weeks that followed, Damian transformed. The detached work-obsessed surgeon became an obsessively doting husband. He accompanied her to every appointment, devoured pregnancy books, and began planning the nursery with meticulous dedication. One afternoon, her phone rang. Clara, my dear. It was Victor Cross. I need to speak with you and Damian. When Victor arrived, he looked as though he had aged 10 years. The sharp predatory confidence was gone, replaced by weary sadness. He sat heavily on the sofa. I came to apologize, he began. For everything. From manipulating you both into this marriage, for using your mother's illness as leverage, for destroying Damian's relationship with Celeste to serve my own ambition. Damian stiffened beside her, but Clara squeezed his arm. I've spent my entire life trying to buy something. Money cannot buy, Victor continued. Respect, acceptance, belonging. And in the process, I almost destroyed my only son. You deserve better from me. Damian struggled with himself, decades of anger warring with this raw moment of honesty. Why now, he finally asked. Because I have seen the way you look at each other. Victor said, looking at Clara's gently swelling abdomen. I have seen the love you have built in spite of me. And I realized I was about to lose the chance to know my grandchild because of my own foolish pride. The silence was heavy. Then Clara spoke. Victor, what you did was wrong. It was manipulative. It was cruel. She took a breath, but it also gave us to each other. Without this forced marriage, Damian and I might never have found our way to this love. Damian looked at her with shock and awe. He turned back to his father. Dad, he said the word feeling foreign. You taught me about medicine, about excellence, about ambition, but you never taught me about forgiveness. Clara taught me that. And because of her, I am willing to try. Victor broke down his shoulders, shaking with sobs. Thank you, he whispered. It was the beginning of something new. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. That night, Clara and Damian stood on his favorite overlook, the Philadelphia skyline spread before them. Her belly was a small, perfect curve under her dress. Did you really forgive him? Clara asked. I am trying to, he said. For you. For our baby. Because holding on to anger only makes you a prisoner of the past. He kissed her temple. And I want to live in the present with you. She smiled. You know, my mother is already planning a ridiculously extravagant baby shower. Let her. Damian murmured, his hand on her abdomen. After everything she's been through, she deserves to celebrate. He looked at Clara, his eyes full of infinite love. We are really doing this. Making a family. We are Clara confirmed. And we are going to mess it up sometimes. And we are going to learn. And we are going to love this baby with everything we have. Just like I love you, Damian whispered. With everything that I am? 6 months later, Clara was in the delivery room, her hand crushing Damian's. You were doing so well, my love, he murmured, wiping her brow. One more big push, Clara. And then a cry pierced the air. Small and furious, and the most beautiful sound they had ever heard. It is a girl, the doctor announced, placing the tiny infant onto Clara's chest. Damian looked at his daughter and completely fell apart. Tears streamed down his face as he traced her tiny nose, her perfect miniature fingers. She is perfect, he whispered. He looked at Clara. You are perfect. Clara laughed through her tears. We made her Damian. Margot, he said suddenly, his eyes meeting hers. Can we name her Margot? Clara's breath caught. Her mother, the woman who had nearly died, who had survived against all odds, who had sacrificed everything for her daughter. She squeezed his hand, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Margot Rose Cross, she whispered. It is perfect. In the weeks that followed, their pristine penthouse transformed. The sterile, minimalist space filled with the chaotic, beautiful clutter of a new baby. Piles of diapers, soft blankets draped over every surface, and the sound of little Margot's soft cries at 3 a.m. Damian, the brilliant surgeon who once operated with cold, detached precision, now stumbled through the darkened apartment, singing off-key lullabies and mastering the art of the perfect swaddle. Margot Ashford was a constant, joyful presence, her face radiant with a happiness Clara had not seen in years. She held her granddaughter and wept. I never thought I would see this day, she confessed. After the heart attack, after losing everything, I thought my life was over. It was not over, Mom Clara said softly, watching them. It just changed. We started over, and their life was not the one either of them had planned. But it was real. Built not on wealth and social standing, but on something far stronger. Forgiveness, resilience, and a love forged in the most impossible of circumstances. One evening, Damian came home to find Clara asleep on the sofa, little Margot sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her. He stood there for a long moment, just watching them. The two loves of his life. He thought back to the cold, angry man who had stood at an altar and whispered, "Let us just get this over with." He had thought that day was an ending. He had been so wrong. It was just the beginning. And somewhere in the quiet of that penthouse with his wife and daughter, breathing softly in the golden evening light, Damian Cross finally understood what his father had spent a lifetime trying to buy and never could. Love was not a transaction. It was a choice he made every single day. And he would choose them. Again and again. Forever.